one other thing that I will never forget is that I was in the residence of Trump Tower the morning after the first debate to ride on the plane, and this is kind of going to be an episode. It's like the height and the beginning of the sharp descent of my career on the Trump campaign. Rode on the Trump plane, and as we were waiting for the People Movers to take us to LaGuardia, we were sitting in the residence of Trump Tower. I'm there with Rudy Giuliani, a few other advisors, and Stephen Miller is there talking to Steve Bannon, and Bannon says to Miller, and you just think about this for a minute, knowing the characters of Bannon and Miller, Bannon says to Miller, "We have a candidate who doesn't listen."
Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, and we just hit 2,000 subscribers, what? So now my kids can finally look me in the eye when they talk to me about YouTube subscribers. Looking at you, Mr. Beast. But I'm Will, your political host, and I'm joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. How's it going, Josh?
Doing well, thanks, Will.
And a story that likely got swept up in the normal day-to-day Trump-dominated news cycle. There was a judge, October 11th, 2023, who issued a sweeping victory for a former Trump campaign staffer by the name of Jessica Denson, signing off on a class action settlement that will permanently free all 2016 campaign workers from the campaign's illegal NDAs. And to help break this down and how it all started is herself, Jessica Denson, and her counsel from Protect Democracy, John Langford. So welcome, guys.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Yes, welcome.
Okay, so I just want to I want to get a few things kind of squared away at the very top. The first is Jessica, can you tell me a little bit more about Show Me a Hero, Person of Interest, and Kimchi Warrior?
I love this interview already. You know what? It's so funny. Okay, so Show Me a Hero was probably one of the most significant acting projects I had done, and one of the last I had done before I took a sharp right turn and joined the Trump campaign. But I'll just give you one little tidbit from Show Me a Hero. So Show Me a Hero, that title is a shortened version of Show Me a Hero and I'll Write You a Tragedy. And it's funny because I always kind of thought I want to make the motto for my life, show me a tragedy and I'll write you a hero. So this fight is kind of one example of that. But I mean, going back to Show Me a Hero, like I said, probably one of the more significant projects I had worked on as an actress before I took this massive detour, and an incredible crew. It's a David Simon project. Oscar Isaac, one of my favorite actors. I played his sister-in-law. An incredible experience. Tiny role, but incredible experience.
That's awesome. Yeah,
politics.
It's interesting because, like, with all of our guests, I mean, like we do a fair amount of research on each of our guests, and yours is a little unique because I think you may be the first person with an IMDb page. So I saw that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like looking up what all these movies were, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to interview somebody famous, like for a different reason,
We did have a guy that the director of he was on IMDb. I think that was.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The Jerry Falwell.
Yeah, that's right. Billy Corbin.
Corbin. Yeah.
Okay, so for real, serious now. So Jessica, so you used to work for the Trump campaign. So talk to us about that evolution. Like, what got you from your Oscar-winning performances to, down the road to work for the Trump campaign?
Well, thank you for that future accolade. As I have discussed many, many times before, I lived in a vortex of right-wing propaganda, otherwise known as Fox News. There's a lot more today, I think, that constitutes that echo chamber, but for me, it was really Fox. And I came from a family that we identified as Republicans, although I would say we were always moderates. And over the course of the Obama administration, I went from having been a fan of Obama and supporting him in the primary in 2008 to thinking that Obama was trying to set our country on fire and anybody aligned with him was trying to do the same. And so there's just really this fear-based propaganda that comes out of the right led me ultimately in 2016 to put a hold on my acting career and think, oh my God, I have to do something to go into politics and help save our country. And, combined with a lot of ignorance about who Donald Trump was, not having researched, some more egregious things like the Central Park Five. I tell myself, and I want to believe this, if I had known that singular data point about his accusation against these innocent men, I could never have supported him. But there were so many things I didn't know, and I didn't choose to educate myself. I just decided, here is someone who looks like he's outside the box. He used to be a Democrat. He's a moderate like me, right? And he's going to challenge the system. He's going to take on these evil, destructive Democrats like nobody else will and save our country. God help me. And that's what motivated me to go and try to help the Trump campaign in 2016.
And what did you do as a part of the campaign?
The first thing I did was I was hired at a pretty low-level position in the data department. I was actually helping run a phone banking platform that all of the volunteers around the country use to call volunteers. And within a very short time, within about 2 weeks, I was asked to do a translation project because I speak Spanish, and there were very few Spanish-speaking people, as you might imagine, on the Trump campaign. I did a very good job on it. I impressed Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon promoted me to lead the Hispanic engagement effort for the campaign. They had not had a campaign-based Hispanic engagement effort prior to that. And so that was my job. I was Hispanic engagement director for a short time before I came under heavy fire and was sabotaged in all ways.
Wow. Okay. So, joining us today is John Langford from Protect Democracy. So, I'd love, John, maybe for you to give us some insight on like how Protect Democracy got involved with Jessica's case, and maybe some of the, I don't know, the legal strategies that you were floating to present the case.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. The truth is, and we'll come back to this, but Jessica is the lead original lawyer for her own case because she started it per se. She was all by herself.
Yeah.
But so stepping back for 1 minute, Protect Democracy was founded in 2016, and its mission is to prevent our democracy from declining to a more authoritarian form of government. And one of the things that we're generally looking out for is something we call the authoritarian playbook that we've seen run all over the world. So it used to be democracies would slide into authoritarian forms of government with like coups and violence in the streets and tanks falling down in the street. And these days, what you see around the world much more often is people coming to power through elections, but then using the tools they're equipped with to undermine the institution. And the playbook includes things like politicizing independent institutions and going after marginalized and vulnerable communities. It also includes spreading disinformation. And so we've done a lot of work around the ways in which we witnessed Donald Trump try to control the narrative and sow falsehoods. And one of the most pernicious and sort of powerful tools he had right when he took office was this NDA that he had a lot of campaign workers signed. And when you saw people start to buck Trump's narrative or to write books that kind of told the story from their view, from the truth, and he would go after them. And so we're kind of on the lookout for that. And I just got lucky, basically. I happened to see what Jessica, then with the help of David Bowles, another amazing attorney that's part of our co-counsel team, had won an incredible victory in the New York State Court. So Jessica can talk about this even more than I can, but she initially, the Trump campaign won an arbitration award against it. So she was sitting under, and they had claimed $1 million in damages, and then they ultimately got an award of $50,000. They were holding over her head. They were going after her co-counsel David Bowles. Ridiculous. And Jessica, really the only person who sort of sat there and stood up to all of that and kept pushing to fight it, tried to file her own lawsuit and got tagged by the arbitration system, which is ridiculous in its own right. and eventually got deemed by an arbitration system by a process she refused to participate in because it was not, it was not in good faith, and it certainly wasn't a place where she was going to get a fair shake. And she went to court and did what is very hard to do, which is get an arbitration award overturned on appeal. Initially got affirmed at the trial level, and she and her counsel, David Bowles, managed to get it overturned. So the press release is saying Trump campaign staffer gets arbitration award overturned on NDA. It was like, wow, who is this person? And so then the very short version is I called David Bowles and said, hey, would you guys be interested in partnering together to do something here? And he said, I got to talk to Jessica, but yeah, like in theory. And then Jessica and I got to meet in Los Angeles, which was awesome, and realized Jessica was who she is, the real deal. And it just felt like a match made in heaven. It was awesome.
Wow, that's so cool. Thanks for sharing that, John. It's interesting because I've never had to sign an NDA, although I've known people that have had to sign NDAs because I'm a pastor and I know a lot of pastors of big churches. And sometimes the pastors of big churches love to hand out NDAs like they're handing out candy. So it's in bills, they don't like when people are disclosing things. It is a little concerning, isn't it? And Jessica, like, thanks for your work and trying to fight this and set a precedent moving forward. I think these kinds of things are extremely important for just normal people who they don't even know what an NDA means, but may one day find themselves under the force of one. So, but with this, in the whole process, what was kind of the timeline, Jessica? Talk us through the timeline that led to your decision to challenge the NDA. I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision, and I'm sure that was a decision that resulted in a lot of stress in your life. So what were the key moments? Like, what hit you so hard that you're like, I have to do this. I'm gonna withstand all the crap that's gonna come my way. I'm gonna do this. What did that look like?
All right. Well, since this is the Faithful Politics podcast, you're going to get a special version of this story.
Nice.
And I share this, but I'm going to give you some more, spiritual insight into this journey because it's everything to me. So basically, I hinted a minute ago that I kind of went through this tumultuous, nightmarish experience on the Trump campaign. At the root of it was sexual discrimination and defamation. Those were the legal claims that I would have. And I wanted very, very much to walk away. I wanted, especially as a Christian, my impulse is to be introspective. My impulse is to look at where I may have erred, what I can correct, and to forgive my enemies, right? This is a very Christian concept. And so I lived with this for about a year, wanting to move forward, feeling like I just felt like I was under such a dark cloud. I really joined that campaign with the spirit of bringing diverse supporters out from the shadows, bringing light to the campaign. And instead I walk away under this dark cloud. I am an actress, but it felt so weird. Like I had been, riding on a plane with the future president of the United States. It felt very weird to just walk away from this experience and just go on auditions again. Something wasn't jiving. There had to be an answer for this. And so I lived with this kind of quandary and darkness for about a year. And ultimately came to the point where through a lot of prayer, a lot of self-reflection, I thought, okay, I've made peace. I'm going to walk away from this. I'm not going to make these same mistakes again. I'm going to stand up for my own value. I'm not going to put myself in toxic places like this to begin with. And I satisfied myself that was okay. And I got to the point about within days of my statute of limitation expiring for certain claims, that I had an existential crisis. And I realized this decision was not okay. And there's a concept in the Bible about put up thy sword. And it's something that's always been very special to me. It's kind of, the concept behind it, as you, I'm sure, know, is to not fight, to let God do the work and to step back from the battle. But I read this article that I will never forget. It was everything to me, and it said, "You cannot put up your sword if the sword has not first been drawn." And I realized in my experience that I had been resisting battles. I had been resisting handling situations that I was confronted with. And this was ultimately a detriment to my growth. It was the reason why I kept experiencing these situations, because I had had this false humility, this sense of, I think, this false sense of, oh, I can just forgive and walk away, that was really keeping me from handling these situations. And so that article was one of the last things I read before I ultimately had this kind of like Jacob wrestling with the angel kind of moment where I was like, do not let me go before you bless me. I'm not going to let you go.
Yeah, totally.
And the next day, I went and filed a lawsuit in New York Supreme Court, which is the trial level court, for sex discrimination and defamation against the Trump campaign without a lawyer. And in case your viewers still don't know what NDA means, it means non-disclosure agreement. And of course, I knew I had signed this NDA working on the campaign. And I'm sure we'll get more into talking about what a ludicrous document it is. But the really funny thing that I'll share with you is I had kind of hustled a little bit before I filed on my own, trying to get a lawyer. I simply did not have the time or the money that any of them wanted to get on my team in time. And one of the lawyers, I'll never forget, said to me, "But you signed an NDA, didn't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, I'm sure you're going to have problems because of that NDA." And I'll never forget. I sat in my car, literally outside of her law offices in New York City, pulled out my laptop, looked at the NDA, read it, and I'm like, "No, I'm good." And I determined, and the funny thing is, like I said, we'll get to this NDA is so arbitrary that you have no idea what it covers. But my reading at the time was, no, this has nothing to do with my employment situation. I'm good. And so I filed it with that kind of naive, ignorance of how they could really weaponize this agreement against me. And that triggered this, retaliation that John kind of hinted at, where they sued me for $1.5 million. And then I sued them again to void the NDA.
Oh my goodness. So what was the personal cost, right? I mean, you talked about like how to go, like obviously there's a time and there was a money cost in trying to figure out, and you had to overcome this boundary of kind of like, it sounds like just ignorance of the exact legal system, and which I would have, and what this thing actually means and what it actually binds me to. But what was the emotional cost? What was that like for you? Share as much or as little as you want, but what was that like? Because I think that people hearing that, they'll connect with the emotional part of this story as much as any other part, any other legal, jargon we can put out or explanations we can give. It's your heart that they'll connect with.
Yeah. I mean, it's immense. It's immense. When I made that decision in 2017, understand, like, this has been my life. John knows this. Like, this has been my life for the past 6 years.
Wow. 6 years. You didn't know when you're putting that in, did you?
No.
6 years.
I didn't know. I mean, I did know it was going to be a long haul. I had no idea what it would be like or how long. But it was it was terrifying at moments. I mean, I want your viewers, and this is something that so many, especially Trump supporters, need to understand. And I say this again, I repeat this. He presents himself as a champion of freedom, as a champion of free speech. And as someone who will execute retribution, and this, of course, has been in the news recently, retribution on his enemies. His supporters need to understand, and understand I used to be one of them. I was one of the most faithful ones, okay? I was very loyal to him in ignorance at one point. He will turn on you when it is convenient for him. He will take away your rights. He will target your family, your finances, and your freedom. And what I experienced through the Trump administration was, I felt, and of course I always had to turn my mind to people in much worse situations than me whenever I would have these really daunting thoughts, but I felt like a version of a political prisoner in a third world country. Having his campaign come after me, at one point when they had this illegal $50,000 judgment against me, they tried to disgorge my bank accounts. They froze them. I basically could not work because they were threatening to disgorge any money that I made to be turned over to them. This is not something that I could ever conceive of, is working and then turning over my income for an illegal judgment. And so I wasn't able to work. It was a kind of oppression that you can't imagine in light of Donald Trump's presidency, which was a daily assault on our democracy in so many ways. It was extremely frightening. It was extremely frightening. And like I said, my whole life, day to day, was consumed with all of the steps and the daily challenges of meeting the legal demands of this lawsuit. And it's overwhelming. It's incredibly overwhelming, and it's incredibly frightening at times. Yeah.
It sounds really exhausting.
Yeah. So I guess why did you have to get out of an NDA to kind of like move on with your life? I mean, I know, I mean, this is just based off of media reports or whatever,
Yeah.
but people get out of NDA so they can write books and make movies or do whatever. So like, I guess what was sort of the limiting factor of the NDA that you were concerned about moving on with your life?
Well, once I saw them weaponize it in that first instance, that was all I needed. That was the signal to me that they will do. It was like, being Mirandized. Anything you say can and will be used against you. That's kind of what this NDA was. And I realized, my God, anything, literally anything I say, and there's a clause that maybe John can talk about in a minute, literally says Trump can, anything he deems confidential is confidential. I mean, it's totally arbitrary. So once I saw how they were willing to weaponize this thing, I knew it had to be done away with. And we didn't talk about the step by step, but when I took the first step of suing them to invalidate this NDA in 2018, that first pro se lawsuit, it was for me with the goal of what we ultimately accomplished, which was nullifying these NDAs for everybody, because I realized how he was using these to suppress speech, how he was using these to silence people, and using people like me as an example to chill speech and show anybody else, just try it, we'll do what we did to Jessica Denson. And so, yeah, for me, it was, we just got to take care of business here. Like, I can't live. I got past the point of worrying that it would keep my lawsuit in arbitration, which was one of the first battles I had to fight. I won an initial motion pro se to have my lawsuit not guided by the NDA, which was actually pretty huge in itself. So it wasn't for that. It wasn't at the moment to write a book. I didn't write a book for 6 years. I'm just now writing my book now. It was just to take care of business. It was a matter of principle. This thing was extremely dangerous, and we had to get rid of it.
Wow, man, that's so inspiring. It's really cool to hear you talk about that, and just the kind of grit that you had to have, and the realization like, hey, this is beyond me, and other people are going to have to face this, and I want to do something. And it always, right? Things can keep going until someone says something. And that's just the reality that we face in so much of life, in our businesses and our families and our right? Things can go under the radar, they're ignored, everyone just kind of pretends they're not there, a happy fiction until it affects someone and someone has to stand up for it. I have a question, John, on the legal side of this, because NDAs, right, non-disclosure agreements, people might hear it, right? You might hear it in, main news to talk about someone who got a book, like you said, like some signing deal, and they had to get the NDA taken away. If you look at the Hillsong documentaries or the documentaries of these big Christian organizations, that have had scandals, they all had NDA agreements, Mars Hill with Mark Driscoll, all that stuff. So what is an NDA? What does it actually do? And can I make Will sign an NDA that says that he'll never, accuse me of being racist in the show, and that the person I murdered 10 years ago, he won't tell anyone about it? Can someone make someone sign that? What limits are there on NDAs? What's going on with this?
Will doesn't seem like the kind of person who would sign that.
He's not.
But it's a great question. I mean, what's interesting to me about this story is the way in which Donald Trump is actually, I don't know, for lack of a better word, an innovator in the NDA world. So you go back to the 50s, 60s, where these things come from is essentially a component of a non-compete agreement. So imagine you've got a bunch of workers and you have a secret recipe for your version of Coke. And you don't want your employees to go off and start a shop 2 blocks down the road with your secret recipe. Or you've got a bunch of customers and a mechanic, and you don't want to take that customer list and open your own shop next door. So there are these agreements called non-competes. Still permissible, were permissible then. And they would include things like don't compete with, and it can protect things that aren't technically under trade secrets or IP law. You can protect the agreement, and we still allow. But then some people, including Donald Trump, started to innovate out to his company. Yeah, and his company, he had everybody sign these things. And true to form, Donald Trump is not a man of modesty. So his NDA is not don't take my secret polling from the campaign, which arguably you could protect even now. Any campaign can protect certain things. Of course they can, for a certain amount of time. Wow. His NDA says, you will never criticize me again for the rest of your life. And like Jessica said, yes. And it says, you will not disparage me for the rest of your life. And you will not disclose anything that I unilaterally deem confidential. And I can enforce this. My whole family can enforce this. And all 500 plus of our companies can enforce this. It's a totally ruinous agreement. And you ask, is a meeting of the minds? I understand the contract.
What?
You understand the contract. Okay, now we can agree on it. If the contract, that's something else. That's like a kid promise on the schoolyard, And this was ridiculous. This was an absurd NDA. And I'll just say one last thing. Think about to your viewers, what does Donald Trump use NDAs for? It's to get divorced from people. It's to pay porn stars off for their things. It's to punish people who try to say, hey, look, something might be going wrong in the government. This guy is, with NDAs in particular, it's tough.
That's really awesome. I'm curious if Konstantin Kilimnik had to sign an NDA when Paul Manafort gave him all that polling data. I'm guessing not, but I'm curious though, Jessica. So how has the results of this been received kind of broadly? And maybe a different way to ask it is, are people reaching out to you saying, hey, thanks, now I get a, talk about the size of Trump's hand or something like that. I don't know.
We get to the humor part of this podcast. No. First of all, I want to address something that I've only very recently, and when I say recently, I mean last 2 weeks recently, been outspoken about. And that is John mentioned 2 layers of silence. You got the NDA, you got the arbitration. I would say the third level of silence that I feel like I've been battling this whole time is the media's ignorance and failure to cover this case. And I think it's something that we have to call out. And I want to credit you 2 guys, Will and Josh, for inviting me on your podcast, because like John said, this is an extremely important case. And the American people should know about it. We actually, gave notice in our case to the class members. So I'm not saying that they didn't receive notice, but the American people generally should be more aware, number one, that Donald Trump tried to censor and silence people so aggressively because he so ardently claims to be a champion of free speech and that he's a victim of violations of free speech, and that this precedent has been set and he has been defeated. I mean, for years, our precedents and the precedents I set even before I brought this team together were proving that the courts were effective to defeat the lawlessness of Donald Trump. And this is kind of a crisis that our democracy is facing. We have to have a system that shows that this man can be held accountable. And here is one woman and her team who have been proving that. This is a story that needs to be told. So, again, kudos to you guys for having me on and having John on to share the importance of this. Has anybody from the campaign reached out to me? No. I've spoken a little bit about this. I was a persona non grata in the campaign. When I got slandered, when I got thrown under the bus, very little has changed since that time. One woman who experienced a similar experience that I did on that campaign reached out to me several years ago and said, Jessica, I want to join you. I want to join your class action, the first version of it that we brought. And she got cold feet almost immediately. And to me, that's just a indication of the kind of fear that people live under when they are subjected to these NDAs. And even when I got my individual precedent, which was 2 years back, that signaled to a lot of people, these things are unraveling. She twice after that failed to show up for a subpoenaed deposition in my case. I mean, this is the level of fear that these NDAs hold over people. So it's extremely significant that now they are entirely free. Part of our victory is, and why we fought so long leading up to this, the campaign said, oh, we're not going to enforce these anymore. And we're like, yeah, your word's not so good. We're going to make sure the court orders this into law. And we fought till the end for that purpose. So not only the campaign could not enforce it, but so that we also have an injunction that none of these hundreds of alleged third parties that are purported to have the power to enforce it could do so either. So now it really has the force of law. Nobody is empowered to enforce these things. And I hope that these people who have been silenced or not spoken out up until this point, more than, tell dramas or soap operas about what they experienced on the campaign, I hope that they utilize their voice for democracy, that they, take this opportunity that has now been given to them to speak what they know truthfully for the salvation, literally, of our democracy.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Well, I think I read something about Omarosa was able to speak out as a result of this NDA. Is that true?
That's true. That's the accurate version. I'm glad you got that. Yeah. We I mean, it has been told inaccurately, but that's absolutely true. When we got that initial precedent in 2021, her lawyer then filed a renewed motion for summary judgment in an existing arbitration that she had, citing our precedent. In the meantime, while he was waiting for a ruling in that arbitration, he actually filed a motion to intervene in our case, quite, openly begging our judge to be able to intervene in our case so that Omarosa could be freed as well. Not to join me as a class representative. I had actually invited her and others to join me previously, and they did not, but just to intervene. In the meantime, our precedent did ultimately free her in her arbitration. So yes, it is our precedent that freed Omarosa. And then fast forward, our judge denied her motion to intervene as moot. So yes.
Free Omarosa.
Free Omarosa, dude. The next campaign, dude. That's great.
Yeah, so I have two questions. One for you, Jessica, and the other for John. With regards to the NDA kind of being dissolved or what, I'm not sure what the proper legal term is, but is this only for the specific type of NDA that you signed? So like, anybody say that worked for the Trump campaign in 2020 would have signed a different one. And so that's kind of your question, Jessica. And then for John, I'm curious on like, does the ruling set any sort of guardrails for the way future NDAs are created? So why don't you go first, Jessica?
Well, we have heard rumors that NDAs were signed in 2020. We don't know precisely what they were. So I can't say with any surety that number one, they actually were, or what the content of those was. I would assume it would be similar. That said, they had been in this litigation with me for years and in these other cases, and maybe I'm not going to make any broad assumptions here, but maybe they were learning some lessons from their failures, their legal failures, but I don't know precisely. And I just wanted to add, John had mentioned that Cohen's language, what appeared in the lawsuit that Trump brought against Cohen, was very similar. His lawyers actually cited our precedent numerous times in their motion to dismiss, and then ultimately Trump dropped that lawsuit. I think this precedent is really having, it will have increasingly far-reaching effects. And the thing about NDAs that I just want to bring out is, they can be illegal all day long. And it won't matter. It won't matter because number one, people don't know, and they live under the assumption that these illegal documents are enforceable. And that's why it's so important, number one, to set the precedent, and number two, to talk about it so people know that there is a challenge to these potentially illegal agreements that a lot of people have signed.
So that's really crazy about these NDAs and this far-reaching implications of them, and the idea that they can change, that this idea, this precedent you set, will have ramifications into other political campaigns for other people. Hopefully anyone listening to this podcast will think a long time before they sign an NDA and make sure they understand exactly what that is putting onto them. Because I don't personally think that NDAs are inherently evil. Obviously, they're very easily abused and I would have no problem with them just being done away with. But it's more like, okay, how do we move forward from here? And Jessica, how do you imagine, okay, let me put it this way. How do you imagine and how do you hope that what you've done, the kinds of consequences it will have in the future, like in political campaigns, and do you think even beyond political campaigns, what do you hope this accomplishes for America and for yourself and the people you care about and our democracy?
Yeah. Sure. Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, I will echo just kind of, I think what you were getting at. Not all NDAs are bad. As John had mentioned, NDAs can have limited purposes that are legitimate. I've signed actually probably many NDAs prior to even working on the Trump campaign for my work in the film industry that had, for instance, if you're working on set and you can't disclose, what's going on that set until the production comes out, or you can't put things on social media, or, you sign some kind of non-disclosure in relation to a settlement. I mean, there's all kinds of contexts that are legal and legitimate. So just to put that out there. This is beyond the pale. This was very much not that case. And what was so egregious about this was that Donald Trump, as the president, was using this private entity, his campaign, as a cutout to suppress speech, to violate people's First Amendment rights. What I really hope, let's just keep it in the context of politics, to begin with anyway. What was so egregious to me in the beginning was that as I started to awaken to how I had been duped and brainwashed to follow Donald Trump, I felt like I could not publicly change my political orientation. That is terrifying in a democracy. That is terrifying in the United States of America. And that is what Donald Trump's NDAs were doing. They were saying, if you one time were so inclined to support me, you will never be allowed to change your mind. That's some communist third world stuff we're dealing with. Very, very scary. So, to the extent that anyone, Trump or otherwise, has ideations to repeat this kind of, forced allegiance in the United States of America, be warned, it will not succeed. On a broader level, just as far as, witnessing corruption or illegality or injustice in workplaces, listen, it's NDA or no NDA almost. There are so many considerations that people are dealing with when they're in environments to speak out. And the NDA was certainly one of mine in the very moments, those really terrorizing moments I had in the campaign. I had this kind of self-imposed loyalty that I had. And then in the back of my mind, it was, and there's this NDA, which probably, you can't separate them. I almost separate them myself, but they're really not separable. But just, I understand how hard it is in a moment when you're dealing with so much pressure, when you're witnessing injustice or abuse or whatever it is, to find the courage to speak out. But even if we can just start in small ways to challenge, if you feel like your voice is being suppressed and the way that it's being suppressed is not right, if you just have that gut feeling, start to follow it. At least start to follow it. You're probably onto something. Trust your intuition. And, I think, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, this has been a 6-year battle for me. It has literally been my life, but it was absolutely worth it. And I absolutely cannot imagine where my soul would be, where my conscience would be if I had not taken those steps. Cleaning house in here, and then as a result, cleaning house in your environment and the world is very rewarding. So from little steps to broader action, I really encourage people to take those. Be brave.
I love that. And I don't know what your plans are for the future, but it sounds like you could really become a lawyer or do something in the legal field, because you have figured out this process. You're saying things, I'm like, you sound like you've gotten your Juris Doctorate. So you have had plenty of experience in this area. I see. It's cool.
Maybe you can be like a TV lawyer. And
yes, that's even better. But you'll convince people because you actually sound like you know what you're talking about.
You guys are really giving me the platform today. You know what? That I would love, and this is all completely serious. I am a creative. I'm an artist, and that is what I love more than anything. I mean, I think storytelling is incredibly powerful. We learn lessons and we find out about the world from the arts in ways that we wouldn't from politics. A lot of people are disengaged, and I would love to reinsert myself into film and to tell stories, maybe legal stories, maybe human rights stories, maybe stories about democracy. That is very much
maybe
something
a documentary
I look forward to doing again.
In concert with Faithful Politics on the correction of NDAs.
Yeah, it's so fun. Yeah, because so currently we're in the midst of working on a 5-part audio documentary about Christian nationalism, and the 4th episode, which we just finished producing this past weekend, is all about kind of the religious ties to Donald Trump and all the sort of different permutations and why people think he's like, King Cyrus and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, like when you do a podcast about faith and politics, this was already sort of set in stone. Like we were going to do this eventually, 4 years later. But no, but anyways, I was going to ask you, or state something and then ask you is what you said about NDAs and what John said about NDAs kind of makes perfect sense on why we can't get any people from the Trump campaign on this show. And it's not for lack of trying. I mean,
it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, like we try to market ourselves in such a way that, hey, if you want to come to a place, you're going to get a pretty diverse audience. I mean, Josh is a conservative, voted for Trump 2016, did in 2020. I'm like your West Coast liberal, born and raised Southern California. So like you're not going to get two different people on the opposite political spectrums on one show anywhere that I know of anyway. So we've had on like, the president of the Heritage Foundation, and we had on the president of Center for American Progress, like that's how diverse our audience is. And like, we always try to reach out to the Trump people, and I get nothing, like nothing. Like, and it makes like everything you said, just sort of,
they're scared for their lives. Well, and you are triggering them. I want you to know that, Will, that you're triggering them
100%.
Every time you send an email.
I have that in.
And I just want that to lay on your
I have that
conscience for a
effect.
while.
Yeah, that's right.
So trigger them again.
I'm gonna go through my
silence.
Rolodex, and if people still use those, I'm gonna go through and try to see, circle back and say, hey, that NDA you probably signed, you don't have to worry about it. But anyways, back to the serious question. So I have to ask. I feel like I wouldn't be doing my due diligence, and this would be one of my last questions. Is so you're free, chains are gone, you're Jessica Unchained. Is there anything that you can tell us about Trump that the general public doesn't know? Like, this is the thing that's going to get the clicks, right? Because like nobody cares about the sort of like details and
Trump gets clicks
and the origin story.
Just the reality.
Like they want like, the dirty secret that, Trump eats fries with mayonnaise or something like that.
Gosh, I have to now really quick. You're putting me on the spot to pick a story. To debut on the Faithful Politics podcast. I'll give you one story and tease for my book where I will tell many more that I haven't yet. But one of them is that I was preparing. One of the first jobs that I had when Steve Bannon promoted me was to prepare Trump for the Commander-in-Chief Forum, which was that event that he had with Matt Lauer on the Intrepid. Matt Lauer interviewed him and then Hillary Clinton separately, and we had to prep him on like foreign policy, veterans issues, military issues. And one of the military advisors that I had gotten quite close to, him and I were trying to, just in this work, trying to find ways to prepare Donald Trump effectively for this. And my coworker and I had literally printed out a binder, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about somebody like Donald Trump, that he's going to read through a binder. And the first time we did it, we didn't even put bullet points. And we were doing this actually for Stephen Miller, and Stephen Miller came back to us. He's like, there's no bullet points. And we're like, I know, we need bullet points. So we did it again with bullet points. And I'm talking to this one advisor, military advisor, and he's like, this guy's not going to read a binder even with bullet points. And I'm like, I got it. So I print out literally one page with like all highlighted, underlined, italics, bold, caps here, just I tried to like make it very visually diverse. And I gave it to him. I said, just this. I said, please do one thing for me. Get this one page to Donald Trump. And he gave it to him and he said, that was perfect. He's like, that was what we needed. And one story he had told me, this is actually what I was thinking of when I started this, is he had told me that, you get all these tags about Sleepy Joe and how, of course, Donald Trump is always attacking Joe Biden for his age and mental decline. It's kind of ironic. But I would hear stories all the time about how Donald Trump was falling asleep in his morning briefings. Like he would have in Trump Tower around this big conference table, and he would just be falling asleep. One of the other comments this advisor said to me is Trump is harder to pin down than a wet noodle. And one thing I will never forget, I'm not telling you my one-on-one in interactions with Trump, because this would be like a whole nother podcast. But one other thing that I will never forget is that I was in the residents of Trump Tower the morning after the first debate to ride on the plane. And this is kind of going to be an episode. It's like the height and the beginning of the sharp descent of my career on the Trump campaign. I rode on the Trump plane. And as we were waiting for the people movers to take us to LaGuardia, we were sitting in the residence of Trump Tower. I'm there with Rudy Giuliani, a few other advisors, and Stephen Miller is there talking to Steve Bannon, and Bannon says to Miller, and you just think about this for a minute, knowing the characters of Bannon and Miller, Bannon says to Miller, "We have a candidate who doesn't listen." I mean, that they know how unhinged he is. As unhinged as they are, and as we all know them to be, they know how uncontrollable and unhinged he is, and dangerous. Stephen Miller, who's trumpeting this project, scary as hell, Project 2025, they all know, as far out as they are, they know how far out he is, and they've known it since 2016 and well before.
Wow. So all of this is going to be in your book?
All of it is, yeah. And
oh my goodness, this is going to be well, when you publish your book, great. We will have you back on. Absolutely. And dig a little bit more.
We have many authors.
Yeah, I'll dig into all the details. But well, thank you so much, Jessica and John. We really appreciate you guys spending some time with us. And
yes, thank you.
This has been really great. And just thank you for all your advocacy and just kind of what you've done for all kinds of people that you haven't even met yet. So well done. It's sort of like you're living the Christian mission. By helping others with nothing, in return. So, thank you for that. But, anyways, oh wait, I was going to ask, how can people get a hold of you? Because I know that you've got some other stuff happening kind of in the background. So how can people stay on top of what you're doing?
Yeah, if you go to thejessicadenson.com, it's basically a link tree. I have all of the links to the updates on our cases, how you can donate to support my existing legal battle, which is that Inception human rights lawsuit, and also my podcast, which is called Lights On. Lights On with Jessica Denson. We do it once a week live on Fridays on Midas Touch Network, and we also do interviews throughout the week with lawmakers, people like Lawrence Tribe talking about the 14th Amendment case, some really important stuff. So if you want to follow that, check out Lights On with Jessica Denson on YouTube or my website, thejessicadenson.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jessica. And to our Faithful Politics listeners and watchers, thanks for spending some time with us, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.